History very rarely records the names and the faces of those who prevent invasions and wars before they've even begun. It's not something that's easy to do. It's kind of a foggy and murky business, but in today's video, I would like to give credit where credit is due. The likelihood now of DC invading Venezuela, using our military to overthrow the duly elected leadership in that country, is incredibly remote. They have failed in an epic way that is almost hard to describe, but I'm going to attempt to do it in today's video. I called this the greatest geopolitical miscalculation that DC has ever made, and it has lived up to that. The seven people that I have on the screen are as follows. Upper left, Abby Martin. Next to her, Anya Parampil. Jimmy Dore, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. Upper right, maybe not so much. Her name is Rachel Boothroyd Rojas, and she was involved with a channel on YouTube called Redfish. Lower left is Max Blumenthal. He and Anya Parampil have a channel called The Gray Zone. Next to him is Mike Preisner, involved in a relationship with Abby Martin. Together they have spoken out for many, many years about imperialism. Lower right is actually an older picture of Jesse Ventura. Now there are many more, but these people, these seven, stood up and spoke about the issue in Venezuela long ago when it was not popular. When it was being reported that it was very likely that Nicolas Maduro was going to fall and Venezuela was going to implode and the shadow government was just going to step in and save the day. The reason I included the Florida Maquis channel logo is because of my audience. I put out the information, but it was you guys that took it and shared it. It was you guys that took it and made it run. Shared it on your Facebook posts, and you guys took ridicule for it too. But as a day turned to a week, and a week turned to a month turned to 6, and then a year went by and there was still no change, all of a sudden, a lot of Johnny-come-latelys got involved in it in the last 2 to 3 to 4 months, and for their own selfish, petty reasons, decided to take the spotlight. But these people, these 7 people and my audience are responsible, and I say this with complete confidence, for stopping the invasion and the overthrow of Venezuela. It's not going to happen now. This is how winning looks. This is how the new fights are going to be done. It's not going to be done with special forces and snipers and guys with heavy-duty military training, like you see in the video games. It's going to be people with guts that have the willingness to stand up and speak when it's not popular. I know for a fact that Abby Martin's been arrested. Mike Preisner's been arrested. I'm not sure about Jesse Ventura. I think he's come close. But a lot of these people that have stood up for righteousness, for the truth of what was going on in Venezuela, have suffered greatly for it. But the truth has come out now. I've put together a list of failures, efforts by DC that have resulted in failure. And we're going to go through these one by one. Of course, the first make-believe story was that the entire country of 30 million people was living out of the garbage and picking through heaps of festering detritus. How would there be food in the garbage if this were the case for the whole country? Well, this is Max Blumenthal proving that there were shortages, yes, but not everywhere. They were taking very specific areas of poverty and cherry-picking it and making it seem as if the problem was much bigger than what it was. Here's Abby Martin doing the same thing. The Florida Maquis actually found a channel that wasn't trying to disprove the story, but actually did a much better job of disproving the story because they weren't trying to. This was Claudia Demeter. I'm sure many of you remember this young girl that was clearly from an affluent, wealthy Spanish family, and she was attempting to, there was problems in her country, of course, so she was attempting to use the blessing that she had to go out and help. Then there was this guy, the original random guy named Juan Requesens. He was the head of the resistance. He was the guy involved in trying to kill Nicolas Maduro. Just his mere presence in front of a camera destroyed their narrative about everyone starving. Or the opposition to Maduro starving and Maduro's friends having access to food. You see, this guy was the head of the opposition, and he was 400 plus pounds morbidly obese. After he was jailed for being involved in the assassination attempts, his sister went out, a little bit chunky herself, with a bunch of people that were clearly not starving, in front of a McDonald's, no less. I don't know if you can kind of see that back here to the left, showing that the narrative was cooked up. Then there was this story about these poor, starving Venezuelans that had to go stone a cow to death because they just hadn't eaten. Well, what they didn't show you was after. See, they didn't show you this picture of Love Handles Lopez here on the left, and they also didn't show you this neatly butchered cow. See, there's another picture I didn't bring up, and it's this guy with this 3.5, 4 foot machete. If they had a 3.5 or 4 foot machete, why did they have to use rocks to kill the cow? Epic fail. Complete and total epic failure to deliver their propaganda. Then there was this story. Nicolas Maduro, they tried to kill him with drones. These weren't little drones. These were big, expensive, thousands and thousands of dollars worth of electronic equipment that they had miscalculated. There were precautions put in place to jam drone signals. And everybody said, well, this was all staged, and Maduro did it himself just for, the optics of it. Well, the Florida Maquis and many others had said that all of this propaganda, D.C., was being orchestrated out of Miami, primarily Doral, Weston, Hialeah, that area. And like clockwork, this guy named Jaime Bailey, a newscaster, he has a kind of a magazine show, came out on TV and admitted he financed the drones and he would do it again. Complete and total failure, and even our intelligence agencies had to admit that it was, in fact, a real assassination attempt. Epic fail. Complete and total failure. But as if that wasn't enough, it continues. January of this year, D.C. decides to stand up its own shadow government with the new version of random guy named Juan. I've continued to refer to him that way, and now it is the case that he is a random guy named Juan. Only 50 countries out of 211 have recognized this guy. And far from being the most popular guy and man of the people, he can't even drive around in his own country without taking his own life in his hands at this point. He goes from safe house to, random meeting of people. But this guy clearly was a DC puppet. He was outed as a DC puppet. He was trained in DC. Fail. They tried to make you believe that this was something constitutional going on. Totally the opposite. What was next? Now we had the humanitarian aid convoy. I'm sure a lot of you remember that. This was an epic failure. They came out in the weeks prior to this and said, we are going to, under any and all circumstances, nothing is going to stop us. We are going to drive these trucks into Venezuela, and we have people on the inside that are going to help us. Total failure. So then Colombian thugs, and even our media proved it, burned their own humanitarian aid trucks, trying to blame it on Nicolas Maduro, but the video was very clear. Why the Colombians, people on the Colombian side with Marco Rubio and supposedly the good guys, why they even had Molotov cocktails? You would have to ask yourself a question. Why would that be necessary for a peaceful humanitarian aid convoy? And many came out and said, well, you know, Nicolas Maduro was killing people. He was killing the opposition. I'd like to show you this story because this one came out 21 May 2019. See, this explains what happened down on the Brazilian border with those indigenous people that were killed. They stopped a military convoy, ripped Venezuelan soldiers out of their vehicles, and tortured them. That's why they were killed. At dawn 22 February, as Venezuela's opposition was preparing to bring humanitarian aid into the country, a convoy of military vehicles drove into the indigenous valley of Cumaracape on its way to the Brazilian border. Members of the Pimon community, a tribe whose territory includes the road to Brazil, wanted to keep the border open to ensure the aid got through, despite President Nicolas Maduro's commanding the military to block it. Before dawn, the villagers had ordered military vehicles headed toward the border to turn around, citing the tribe's constitutionally guaranteed autonomy over their territory. But the army convoy that arrived at dawn was moving quickly, and the tribesmen were only able to stop the last of the 4 vehicles. A jeep carrying 4 National Guard officials who told the villagers they were working on a mining project. Believing the officers were on their way to block the aid, several villagers pulled them from the vehicle, seized their weapons, and detained them, according to interviews with 15 villagers. Some of the other soldiers who had stopped several hundred meters ahead, got out of their vehicles with weapons in hand and approached. Shouting broke out, and one of the soldiers fired a shot downward onto the road. According to the villagers and a cell phone video seen by Reuters that was filmed by a resident, the remaining soldiers began firing repeatedly in the direction of the village as they ran back toward their vehicles, according to witnesses and the video. The repercussions included the arrest of 23 Pemon tribesmen, some of whom say they were beaten in custody. Pemon villagers also held more than 40 members of the military hostage, some of whom suffered severe bites after being left half naked atop ant nests in retribution for the killings. So, let me put this in perspective. If this had been my group, my convoy, and I was in command of it, there would have been a lot more than 4 dead. Everybody comes home. When you're following orders, nobody gets left behind. They left them half naked on top of ant nests. These poor, peace-loving indigenous personnel. And then who can remember, I'm sure everyone can't forget this, Marco Rubio putting out that filthy, horrible tweet about Gaddafi and likening Nicolas Maduro to a CIA-installed drug thug, Noriega. Fail. Total and epic failure. Nothing changed. What was next? Oh yeah, that's right. Then, after failing DC decides to bomb the Guri Dam. Send operatives in to sabotage the electrical grid, plunging Venezuela into total darkness. For sure they thought this would do it. But they didn't. They failed again. The power came back on. It was revealed who was in the sabotage, and they were put in jail. And to this day, power grid's still up in Venezuela. Fail. Then we finally have this last ridiculous staged coup where they lied to soldiers saying it was going to be an awards ceremony, where they broke a guy out of house arrest. Total failure. Total and epic failure. It did nothing. And now, what would have been seen to be unthinkable from Washington, D.C., is now going to have to be the case. one day ago, Juan Guaido considers negotiating with President Nicolas Maduro as anti-government protests dwindle, meaning the game is over. It's done. And DC has been defeated. They have lost at every turn. The only thing they can show that was even remotely like any type of a win was going in and kicking Code Pink out of that building in DC. A building that Nicolas Maduro had abandoned anyway. Their diplomats had left long before. It is possible to win. It is very possible to win. But you have to stick to your guns. And you have to recognize allies when you see them. You don't have to agree on everything. But these people are heroes. Every single one of them. All 7 of these individuals and my audience. I'm only one voice. I can only show you what's out there. It takes you to spread that word out. And we won. This is why states' rights can win. If people just stick to their guns. Texas just asserted immune sovereignty against DC. It's another subject for another day. But we have Wisconsin, California, Texas, Missouri, Alabama. Right now, for different reasons, and I believe Kentucky as well in something else, standing up and telling DC, nope, we are done listening to you. We are done taking our marching orders from you. So I'm going to leave these faces up, and I'll say them one more time. Upper left, Abby Martin. Next to her, Anya Parampil. Jimmy Dore. Upper right, Rachel Boothroyd Rojas. Lower left, Max Blumenthal. Next to him, Abby Martin's boyfriend. I can't remember his name right now. Jesse Ventura in the lower right, the Florida Maquis logo representing my audience. But I wish I could. I'm just having a brain drain right now. But Abby Martin's boyfriend was a soldier in Iraq. He's actually been on the front lines, been shot at. And he has been kind of a quieter voice in this. But he has definitely done his part. I mentioned his name earlier in the video. I'm sure many of you will remember that. It's just one of those things that happens when you start doing a video, that you sometimes just certain pieces of information just leave your head. So I guess I will leave it there and not waste any more of your time. Like, share, subscribe. God bless you all. Thank you again so much for your support. We're going to continue the fight. Like, share, subscribe. Mike Preisner. I wasn't going to let that run out until we got that name. He deserves recognition. So, thank you for waiting. I just had to go over to my phone real quick and pull up that name. Like, share, subscribe. Thank you guys for your support. I really appreciate it.